6 months after the Battle of New Haven, Ambassador Yunji stood in the Great Hall where the Galactic Council met. But today was different. Today, she wasn't defending humanity's actions. Today, she was making history. Beside her stood Shirak, representing the Draconid Conclave. Together, they signed the Mutual Defense and Cooperation Accords. It was the first formal alliance between Draconids and any younger species in over 2,000 years. The terms were simple. Humans would provide innovative thinking, rapid adaptation, and what Shirak called the courage of innocence. Draconids would offer their military might, ancient wisdom, and political influence. They would work together as equals, sharing both risks and rewards. Elder Vix watched from his seat on the council. He looked older than before, tired. The galaxy was changing and he wasn't sure how he felt about it. "This is unprecedented," he said quietly. "Draconids have served as guardians for eons. They protect all species equally. By forming an alliance with humans, you show favoritism. You abandon your neutrality." Shirak's response was gentle but firm. "My species has served the galaxy according to your rules. Those rules failed me when I needed protection most. I will not abandon the beings who saved my children simply because you find them inconvenient." The council protested, but they couldn't actually stop the alliance. The Draconids had earned their independence through millennia of service. If they chose to partner with humans, that was their right. The real test came in the years that followed. Shirak's children grew strong, raised by 2 species instead of 1. They called themselves the First Generation, and they were unlike any Draconids who had come before. Vel became the first Draconid to attend a human engineering academy. At first, the professors didn't know what to do with a student who was 12 feet tall and had wings. But Vel proved herself quickly. She combined Draconid material science with human improvisational design, creating things neither species could have made alone. Her final project was a new type of ship hull that used living Draconid bioarmor combined with human adaptive systems. It could repair itself, adapt to different environments, and was stronger than anything the galaxy had seen. Shipbuilders from a dozen species lined up to license her design. Crix took a different path. She became a theoretical mathematician, working with human and Draconid researchers to solve problems in quantum communication. Her breakthrough came when she was only 10 years old by Draconid standards. She developed a proof that revolutionized how species communicated across vast distances. Messages that used to take weeks now took hours, but it was Sina who surprised everyone the most. She opened a restaurant. The idea seemed ridiculous at first. Draconids didn't cook. Most species consumed food purely for nutrition. But Sina had learned from Minho that food could be more than sustenance. It could be art. It could be love made visible. Her restaurant, called the Dragon's Kitchen, became famous across the galaxy. She created fusion cuisine that merged human cooking traditions with Draconid nutritional science and ingredients from dozens of worlds. Diplomats began scheduling meetings at her restaurant because the food made even enemies willing to talk. The crew of the Pathfinder dispersed to new assignments, but they remained connected. Daehyun commanded the first joint human-Draconid exploration vessel, searching for new worlds with a mixed crew. Every problem they encountered, they solved by combining human creativity with Draconid experience. Bile headed an interspecies medical research institute. She and Jiwoo trained doctors from dozens of worlds in the techniques they had developed to save Shirak. Those techniques had already saved thousands of lives across the galaxy. Taewon designed hybrid technologies, systems that merged the best of many species' knowledge. Hanara became a professor, teaching young officers from across the galaxy how to think creatively under pressure. Subin ran a communications network that kept everyone connected. Even Kyung-mi, the quiet pilot, became famous. She established a flight school where humans and other species learned to fly together, adapting each other's techniques. Minho wrote a cookbook that became a bestseller. Dongjun, the historian, documented everything, making sure the story would never be forgotten. But the alliance wasn't perfect. There were arguments, cultural misunderstandings, moments when the differences between species seemed too great to overcome. But humans and Draconids had learned something important. Friendship wasn't about being the same. It was about choosing to work through the differences. 5 years after the alliance was formed, a young reporter interviewed Shirak for the anniversary celebration. The question everyone wanted answered was simple. Why did she trust humanity when the galaxy's oldest civilizations did not? Shrek's answer became legendary. It was recorded, translated into every known language, and taught in schools across the galaxy. "I was dying," she said. "My children were dying. 17 civilizations heard our call for help. All of them had better technology than the humans. All of them had more resources. All of them chose to do nothing because helping us was inconvenient. Then came a species barely 3 generations into space travel. Their ship was small. Their equipment was inadequate. They had no obligation to help us. They knew the Council would punish them. They knew they would probably fail. But they didn't calculate the risk versus reward. They didn't debate the diplomatic consequences. They saw beings who needed help, and they decided that was enough. That choice revealed more about humanity's character than any technological achievement ever could." The reporter asked a follow-up question. "But surely the older species are wiser. They've existed for millions of years. They've seen everything." Shrek nodded. "Yes, they've grown wise through experience. But they've also grown cautious. They've learned to calculate every risk, predict every outcome. They've become so good at avoiding failure that they've forgotten how to succeed. Humans still make mistakes. They fail often. But they also try things no one else would attempt. They look at the word impossible and think it just means no one has tried hard enough yet. That's not ignorance. That's courage." The alliance between humans and draconids became a catalyst for broader change. Other young species found the courage to challenge the Council's cautious policies. New alliances formed based not on technological parity but on shared values. Species who had never worked together before began cooperating. The Vrex threat was eventually contained through combined efforts. It took 20 species working together, sharing knowledge and resources. The old Council would have said such cooperation was impossible. Too many political complications. Too many cultural differences. But the new generation proved them wrong. Innovation emerged from unexpected collaborations. Problems that had seemed unsolvable were solved by beings who approached them from different angles. The galaxy discovered that diversity wasn't a weakness to be managed. It was a strength to be celebrated. The story of the Pathfinder became required study for all new spacefaring species. Young captains across the galaxy learned about Dae-Hyun and his crew, about Shrek and her children, about the moment when humanity proved that character mattered more than technology. On the 10th anniversary of the rescue, Captain Dae-Hyun stood with Shrek and her adult children at a memorial station, built at the site where they had first met. A monument had been erected there, showing a human and a draconid reaching out to each other across the stars. They looked out at space together, these friends who had changed the galaxy. Somewhere out there, another impossible situation awaited. Another species would face overwhelming odds. Another cry for help would echo through the darkness. And humanity, joined now by draconids and a growing coalition of species who refused to accept that impossible meant inevitable, would be there. Because that's what they did. That's who they were. Do you ever regret it? Dae-Hyun asked Shrek. Forming the alliance? Changing your species' entire philosophy? Shrek looked at her children. Vel was explaining engineering principles to a group of young students from 3 different species. Crix was working with mathematicians via hologram, solving problems in real time. Sina was planning her next restaurant, this time on a world that had never tasted cooked food before. I regret only one thing, Shrek said, that it took dying for me to learn how to truly live. My species guarded the galaxy for millions of years, but we kept ourselves separate. We protected others but never let ourselves care. You showed me what we were missing. We just did what felt right, Dae-Hyun said. Exactly. The older species spend so much time thinking about what's wise that they forget to ask what's right. You don't have that problem. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, Shrek spoke again. The dragon couldn't protect her young. She was dying, her children fading. And the galaxy's most powerful civilizations chose politics over compassion. Then came a species barely 3 generations into space, with inadequate technology and no obligation to help. They saw beings who needed help and decided that was enough. That choice changed everything. Not just for me and my children, for the entire galaxy. You proved that the best answer to any cry for help is simply, "We're coming." Dae-Hyun smiled. And we always will be. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Shrek asked permission to stay with the Pathfinder crew. Her children needed more time to recover fully, she explained. But everyone knew the real reason. She didn't want to leave. For the first time in her 1,000-year life, she had found people who felt like family. The Draconid officials were confused. Guardians didn't form attachments. They protected civilizations, but they kept their distance. Emotional bonds made their duties harder. But Shirok didn't care about tradition anymore. Her children were alive because humans had formed an emotional bond with them. She was beginning to think the old ways weren't always the best ways. What happened next surprised everyone, including the humans themselves. The 3 baby Draconids became friends with the crew. Real friends, not just the beings they lived with. Vel, the oldest, followed Taewon everywhere. The engineer was working on upgrading the ship's power systems one day when he noticed the young Draconid watching him intently. "Do you want to help?" Taewon asked. Vel's eyes lit up. Her species had incredible technology, but it was all biological, grown rather than built. The idea of assembling machines from separate parts fascinated her. Taewon showed her how to use tools, how to read technical diagrams, how to solve problems when the manual didn't have answers. "Your people build things from living materials," Taewon explained. "We build things from metal and circuits, but the process is the same. You understand what you need, figure out what you have, and create something new." Within weeks, Vel was helping with repairs. Her small claws could reach places human hands couldn't. Her natural understanding of energy flow helped them redesign systems to work more efficiently. She combined Draconid instincts with human engineering in ways neither species had imagined. Crix became friends with Hana-Ra. The lieutenant was working on navigation calculations when the young Draconid settled beside her workstation. "What are you doing?" Crix asked. "Trying to plot a course through an asteroid field. The calculations are complex because everything is moving." Crix looked at the numbers on the screen. After a moment, she said, "The pattern repeats every 17 minutes. If you enter the field at this point here, the asteroids will clear a path." Hana-Ra checked the calculations. Crix was right. The young Draconid could see patterns that would take a computer hours to find. They started working together on increasingly complex problems. Hana-Ra taught Crix human mathematics. Crix showed Hana-Ra how Draconids perceived space and time. They created solutions that combined human logic with Draconid intuition. But the biggest surprise was little Sina. The youngest and smallest of Shirak's children spent most of her time in the ship's kitchen with Chef Minho. "I don't understand," Shirak said to Daehyun one day. "Draconids consume nutrients in their pure form. We don't understand this human obsession with combining ingredients and applying heat. Yet Sina spends hours watching him cook." Daehyun smiled. "Cooking isn't just about nutrients. It's about creating something that brings joy. Watch them." In the kitchen, Minho was teaching Sina how to taste. Draconids could analyze the chemical composition of anything they consumed, but they had never learned to appreciate flavor. "Try this," Minho said, offering her a small piece of fruit. Sina ate it carefully. "It contains fructose, vitamins, and fiber. Adequate nutrition, but how does it taste? Sweet, tart? Do you like it?" Sina thought about this. "Like sunshine," she said finally. "If sunshine had a flavor." Minho grinned. "Exactly. Now you're getting it." Months passed peacefully. The Pathfinder continued its mission, now with a Draconid family aboard. The crew adjusted to having passengers who were 12 feet tall and had wings. Shirak learned to appreciate human humor and art. Her children learned what it meant to play. Then the emergency message arrived. Subin's face was pale as she called Daehyun to the communications station. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from New Haven Colony. They're under attack." "Pirates?" Daehyun asked. "Worse. The Rex, they've evolved new weapons. The colony's defenses are failing. They have maybe 2 days before everyone there dies." The crew gathered on the bridge. New Haven was 3 days away at their fastest speed. Council forces were a week out and still debating whether to respond. Over 5,000 humans lived on that colony. Most of them were families, children. "We can't possibly fight the Vrex," Hana-Ra said quietly. "We're an exploration ship, not a warship. We'd be destroyed." Daehyun looked at his crew. He thought about all those families on New Haven. He thought about the council, probably having another long debate while people died. He thought about Shirak and her children, who would be dead if everyone had made the safe choice. "Set a course for New Haven," he said. "Maximum speed, Captain," Taewon said carefully. "Even at maximum speed, we'll arrive too late. By the time we get there, the colony will be gone." Shirak's voice filled the bridge. "Unless you have help." Everyone turned to look at her. The massive draconid was standing in the doorway, her 3 children behind her. You saved my children when no one else would. Now I will save yours. Shirak sent a message to the draconid homeworld. For over 1,000 years she had served as a guardian. She had protected countless worlds, saved millions of lives, asked for nothing in return. Now she was calling in those debts. She needed 3 warships. She needed them immediately, and she was not asking permission. The draconid leadership was shocked. Guardians didn't ask for help. They didn't get involved in species conflicts. They certainly didn't call in favors for humans, but they also couldn't refuse Shirak. She had earned the right to ask. 3 draconid warships arrived within hours. The combined force jumped to New Haven together. The Pathfinder, tiny compared to the massive draconid vessels, led the way. On the bridge, Daehyun looked at Shirak. "Thank you," he said simply. "No," Shirak replied. "Thank you. For teaching me that asking for help isn't weakness. For showing me that friendship is worth more than duty. For reminding me what it means to care." They emerged from the jump near New Haven. The colony was burning. Wreck ships swarmed around it like insects. The settlers' defenses were almost gone. The Vreks had never fought draconids who worked with another species. They had never encountered humans who turned desperate defense into aggressive counterattack. They had never seen what happened when 2 species combined their strengths. Taewon and Vel worked together to modify the human weapons to interface with draconid systems. Jiwoo's knowledge of Rex biology helped the draconids target weak points they didn't know existed. Hanara and Crix coordinated the battle, their combined mathematical abilities predicting enemy movements before they happened. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Vreks were retreating. New Haven was saved. But more importantly, something unprecedented had occurred. Humans and draconids had fought side by side, not as a powerful species protecting a weaker one, as equals, as friends, as family, and the galaxy would never be the same. A message from the Galactic Council arrived 3 days after the rescue. Ambassador Yunji read it twice, hoping she had misunderstood. But no, it was very clear. The Council was extremely angry. She walked slowly to the communications room where Daehyun and his crew waited. They could see from her face that the news was bad. "They want all of you to face trial," Yunji said quietly. "They're charging you with violating the non-interference protocols, entering a restricted zone without permission, experimenting on a protected species without proper authorization. The list goes on. But we saved them," Biel said. "Shirak and her children would be dead if we hadn't helped." The Council doesn't see it that way. They say you were reckless. They say you didn't understand the bigger picture. They say that younger species like humans need to learn to follow the rules before they're allowed to make their own decisions. Hanara laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "So we should have just left them to die?" That's what following the rules means. According to the Council, yes. They say that the draconid species would have preferred to let Shirak and her children die with honor, rather than be saved by humans. They say you've created a political problem. Daehyun stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see Shirak playing gently with her children. Vel was practicing flying, her small wings flapping hard. Crix was examining a piece of the broken ship with intense focus. Little Sina was curled up sleeping on her mother's back. "I'll face their tribunal," Daehyun said. "But I won't apologize. We did the right thing. You might lose your ship, your career. They might ban humans from space travel altogether. Then that's what happens. But those children are alive. Nothing the Council says can change that." The trial was scheduled for 2 weeks later at the Council's main station. But before it could happen, something unexpected occurred. Shirak refused to go home. When Draconid officials arrived to escort her back to their homeworld, she told them she wouldn't leave until she had spoken to the Council herself. The officials were shocked. Draconids never got involved in political matters. They were guardians, not politicians, but Shirak was determined. She sent a message directly to the Council leadership. She demanded to be heard. And because she was a Draconid, because her species had served the galaxy for thousands of years, they couldn't refuse her. The Council chamber was enormous, built to hold representatives from hundreds of different species. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness. The walls were covered in screens showing worlds from across the galaxy. When Shirak entered, the room fell completely silent. Even weakened from her injuries, she was magnificent. Her scales had regained most of their shimmer. Her wings, which could span 50 meters when fully extended, were folded carefully against her back. Her 3 children walked beside her, small but proud. The head of the council, an ancient being called Elder Vix, spoke first. "Guardian Shirak, we are pleased to see you recovered. However, the matter before us concerns the humans who violated our protocols. Their actions, while perhaps well-intentioned, cannot be allowed to set a precedent." Shirak's voice filled the chamber, amplified by the room's systems. "I wish to ask the council a question. When my distress signal was sent, how many civilizations received it?" Elder Vix looked uncomfortable. "That information is not relevant to the current proceedings." "I believe it is very relevant." "How many?" A junior council member checked his records. 17 civilizations detected the signal, Guardian Shirak. 17. "And how many responded?" "Silence. None," Shirak said, answering her own question. 17 advanced civilizations, some with technology far beyond the humans, all received my call for help. And every single one chose to do nothing. Do you know why? "The Velcor system was restricted," Elder Vic said. "The risk of encountering the Vrex was deemed too high. The political implications were too complex. It was decided that intervention would cause more problems than it would solve." "Decided by whom?" "Not by me, not by my children who were dying. You decided that our lives were worth less than your political convenience." The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted objections. Screens flickered with angry messages. But Shirak continued, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Then came the humans. They had no alliance with my people. They knew you would punish them. They knew their technology was inadequate. They knew they would probably fail. And yet they came. They risked everything because they believed that trying to save a life was more important than following rules that let children die." Shirak lowered her massive head to look directly at Elder Vix. "You call them reckless. I call them brave. You call them ignorant of consequences. I call them wise enough to know that some things matter more than politics. You call them primitive. I call them more advanced in the ways that truly matter than any species in this chamber." She turned to face the entire council, her voice ringing with power. "My children are alive because humans couldn't stand by and watch them die. Where were you? Where was your advanced technology? Where was your ancient wisdom? You had every advantage and you chose to do nothing." Little Sina, the smallest of Shirak's children, stepped forward. Her voice was high and clear. "The humans sang to me when I was sick. Chef Minho made me soup even though he'd never cooked for a draconid before. Dr. Bial stayed awake for 6 days to make sure we would live. Why are you punishing them?" The question hung in the air. No one had an answer that would satisfy a child. Elder Vix was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "The charges against the human crew are dismissed. This tribunal is concluded." But the impact of Shirak's words didn't end there. The entire proceeding had been broadcast across the galaxy, as all council meetings were. Every civilized world had watched a Draconid guardian challenge the council's authority. More importantly, they had watched her praise the humans. The response was immediate. Requests began flooding human space. A mining colony needed help with equipment that kept failing. A medical station was dealing with a disease they couldn't cure. A diplomatic mission needed someone who could think outside traditional solutions. At first, human leadership was cautious. They remembered the council's anger. But Yunji convinced them to accept some requests, small ones at first, simple problems that wouldn't cause political issues. Every time, humans succeeded in ways that surprised everyone. They didn't always have the best technology. Their methods were often considered unconventional. But they had something the older species had lost: the willingness to try new things, to take risks, to care more about results than about following procedures. A research scientist named Jay Mean studied the phenomenon. He wrote a paper that became famous across the galaxy. His conclusion was simple. The older species had become so advanced that they could calculate every risk, predict every outcome. They had learned to avoid failure so well that they had forgotten how to succeed. Humans, still young and hungry, still made mistakes. They failed often, but they also tried things no one else would attempt. And sometimes, just often enough, they achieved the impossible. The galaxy was beginning to understand something important. Having the most advanced technology wasn't enough. You also needed the courage to use it. You needed people who looked at an impossible situation and thought, "Let's try anyway." You needed humans. The first thing Bial did was call every medical expert she knew. She sent messages to hospitals, universities, and research stations across human space. The message was simple. We need help saving a draconid, and we need it now. The responses came flooding in within minutes. Doctors who had never seen a draconid offered theories. Scientists shared research papers. Students sent ideas that seemed crazy but might just work. Humanity had always been good at one thing, working together when it mattered most. Jiwoo, the ship's xenobiologist, studied every piece of information they had about draconid biology. It wasn't much. The draconids were private, ancient, and didn't share medical information with younger species. But Jiwoo was patient. She looked at what they did know and started making educated guesses about what they didn't. Their cells are crystalline, she explained to Biol. Not like our soft, flexible cells, more like living gemstones. The poison is attacking the connections between the crystals, making them fall apart. Biol rubbed her tired eyes. So we need something that can rebuild those connections faster than the poison can break them down. But what? Taewon had been listening from the engineering station. He stood up suddenly, his eyes bright with an idea. Nanites. The adaptive nanites we use for terraforming. They're designed to work with crystalline structures, to help build and repair rock formations. What if we modified them to work on living crystals instead? That's insane, Hanara said. But she was already running calculations on her computer. It might work. The nanites could learn the pattern of healthy draconid cells and repair the damage. But we'd need to program them to recognize the difference between the poison and healthy tissue. How long would that take? Daehyun asked. Normally, months. We'd need to run tests, do simulations, get approval from medical boards. But we don't have months. We have hours. The crew looked at each other. This was the moment. They could play it safe, follow the rules, and watch Shirak and her children die. Or they could take a risk that might kill their patients faster. Do it, Daehyun said. The next 16 hours were a blur. Taewon tore apart their terraforming equipment and rebuilt it into something that had never existed before. Jiwoo worked with tissue samples from Shirak, teaching the nanites what draconid cells should look like. Biol prepared the injection system, calculating dosages for a creature she had only read about in stories. Communications officer Subin kept the information flowing. Updates from Earth, suggestions from Mars colony, a breakthrough from a research station near Jupiter. Everyone was helping, even people who would never meet Shirak, even people who had never seen a draconid. They were doing it because that's what humans did. Someone needed help, so they helped. Finally, after 16 hours of non-stop work, they had something that might work. Biol held the injection device in her hands and stared at it. It looked so simple. Just a tube filled with gray liquid. But inside that tube were millions of tiny machines that would either save Shirak's life or end it faster. We should test it first, Jiwoo said quietly. Run more simulations. We don't have time, Biol replied. Shirak's vital signs are failing. Another hour and it won't matter what we do. Daehyun suited up and went outside with Biol. They floated over to Shirak, who was barely conscious now. Her children weren't moving at all. Shirak, Daehyun said gently, we have something. It's untested. It might not work. It might make things worse. But it's the only chance we have. The massive dragon's eyes opened slowly. She looked at the small humans floating in front of her. You made medicine for me? In less than a day? We tried, Daehyun said simply. Something that might have been a smile crossed Shirak's face. Then use it on my children first. If it works, you can use it on me. If it doesn't work, at least I'll be here with them at the end. No, Biol said firmly. We need to use it on you first. Your biology is fully developed. We can monitor how the nanites interact with your cells and adjust the formula for your children. They're still growing. Their cells are different. What saves you might not save them. Shirak wanted to argue, but she was too weak. She nodded once. Biol administered the injection. The gray liquid disappeared into Shirak's massive body. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Shirak's whole body started to shake. Her temperature is spiking. Hanara shouted from inside the ship. 40 degrees above normal. 50, 60. The nanites are fighting the poison, Jiwoo said, watching the data stream across her screens. Her immune system is attacking both the nanites and the poison. It's a war inside her body. Shirak's scales started to glow with heat. Daehyun and Biol had to back away. They watched helplessly as the massive creature convulsed in pain. We're killing her, Biol whispered. We should never have tried this. Wait, Hanara said. Her temperature is starting to drop. Slowly, but it's dropping. They watched for 3 hours, the longest 3 hours of their lives. Shirak's body temperature rose and fell in waves as the nanites learned to work with her immune system, instead of against it. The poison tried to adapt, but the nanites adapted faster. Finally, Shirak's eyes opened. Her scales, which had been dull gray, showed the faintest hint of blue. "It worked," she said, her voice stronger than before. "By the ancient stars, it actually worked. How?" "We didn't fight the poison directly," Biel explained. "We taught your body how to fight it. The nanites showed your immune system how to recognize and destroy the toxin. Your own body did the rest." Shirak looked down at her children, still unconscious in her arms. "Can you save them too?" "We'll try," Daehyun said. "But their biology is different. We need to modify the treatment." The next 6 days were even harder than the first. The baby draconids Vel, Crix, and Sina were so small and fragile. Their crystalline cells were still forming. The treatment that worked on Shirak was too strong for them. Jiwoo came up with a new approach. Instead of fighting the poison, they would use Shirak's blood. Her body had learned to produce antibodies against the toxin. If they could extract those antibodies, modify them for juvenile draconid biology, and introduce them slowly, the baby's immune systems might learn without the violent reaction their mother had experienced. It was delicate work. Every few hours they gave the babies a tiny dose. They monitored every change in their vital signs. The whole crew took turns watching, afraid to sleep, afraid to look away even for a moment. Pilot Kyung-mi kept the ship stable. Chef Minho made sure everyone ate, even when they didn't feel hungry. Even the ship's historian Dong-jun helped by finding old medical texts that gave them ideas no one had thought of in centuries. On the 6th day, little Sina opened her eyes. She was the youngest and smallest, and everyone had thought she would be the first to die. But she looked up at her mother and made a small chirping sound. Shirak's cry of joy could be heard even through the vacuum of space, transmitted through their communication systems. She held her daughter gently, tears streaming down her scaled face. Hours later, Crix woke up. Then Vel. All 3 babies were weak, but they were alive. Their scales were beginning to show color. Vel's were deep purple like her mother's. Crix had scales of brilliant blue. Sina's were silver, shimmering even in the dim light. The crew of the Pathfinder gathered on the bridge. They looked out at Shirak and her children through the windows. They were exhausted, running on no sleep and too much coffee, but they were smiling. "We did it," Taewon said quietly. "We actually did it. The council is going to be furious," Hanara pointed out. "We broke about 100 regulations. We used untested medicine on a protected species. We could all lose our licenses." Daehyun looked at his crew. These incredible people who had worked a miracle. "I don't care. They're alive. That's what matters." Outside, Shirak held her children close and watched the small human ship. She had lived for over 1,000 years. She had seen civilizations rise and fall. She had witnessed wonders and horrors beyond counting. But she had never seen anything quite like this. These humans, with their primitive technology and impossible determination, had saved her family when the galaxy's greatest powers had turned away. She would not forget this, and she would make sure the galaxy didn't forget it either. Part 1, the alarm on the bridge screamed for attention. Captain Daehyun ran his fingers through his dark hair and stared at the screen in front of him. The signal was old, maybe hundreds of years old, but it was real. Someone out there needed help. Lieutenant Hanara walked up behind him. She was the smartest person on the ship, always thinking 3 steps ahead. She looked at the data streaming across the monitor and her eyes went wide. "Captain, this signal is coming from the Velcor system. That place is forbidden. The Galactic Council made it very clear that no one should go there." Daehyun knew she was right. The Council had warned humanity many times. Humans were too new to space travel. They were too quick to jump into danger. They helped people who didn't want to be helped. The older alien species said humans needed to learn patience and follow the rules. But Daehyun couldn't stop thinking about the signal. Hidden in the noise and static was something that sounded like a cry for help. Maybe it was just his imagination, but he had to know. "Set a course for Velcor," he said quietly. The crew argued for hours. Some said they should tell the council first. Others said it was too dangerous. But in the end, they all knew what they had to do. If someone needed help, they would help. That was the human way. The Pathfinder jumped through space and arrived at the coordinates 2 days later. What they found made everyone on the bridge go silent. Floating in the darkness of space was a field of broken metal and shattered crystal. Huge pieces of what had once been a beautiful ship drifted slowly past their windows. The crystals glowed with a faint blue light, even though they were cracked and broken. Taewan, the ship's engineer, recognized the material immediately. His hands shook as he pointed at the screen. That's Draconid bioarmor. I've only seen pictures in old books. It's supposed to be almost impossible to break. But look at it. It's shattered like glass. Everyone knew about the Draconids. They were legends. Ancient beings that looked like massive dragons from Earth's old stories. They had protected the galaxy for thousands of years. Each Draconid was incredibly powerful, able to defend entire planets by themselves. Nothing could hurt them. Or so everyone thought. There, Hanara said, pointing at the main screen. Life signs. Faint, but they're there. The Pathfinder moved carefully through the debris field. They found her floating near the largest piece of wreckage. She was huge, maybe 30 meters from nose to tail. Her scales, which should have shimmered like diamonds, were dull and gray. Her breathing was slow and painful to watch. But what made Daehyun's heart break was what he saw beneath her massive claws. 3 small shapes huddled together. Baby Draconids, each one no bigger than a human. They weren't moving. Get the medical bay ready, Daehyun ordered. We're bringing them aboard. Captain, Hanara said carefully. The adult alone weighs more than our entire cargo hold can support. We can't possibly bring her inside the ship. Then we'll treat her out here. Get Bile and her medical team suited up. Move. The medical team worked in their spacesuits floating around the massive creature. Dr. Bile had treated many alien species before, but never anything like this. She scanned the Draconid with every tool they had. The Draconid's eyes opened. They were deep purple, ancient, and wise. A voice filled everyone's helmets, translated by their communication devices. You are human. Yes, Daehyun said. My name is Daehyun. We received your distress signal. We're here to help. The massive creature made a sound that might have been a laugh, but it turned into a cough that shook her entire body. My name is Shirak. Was a guardian. The Vrex attacked my ship, my nursery ship. They knew my young were aboard. They knew we would be vulnerable. The Vrex? Hanara asked. But they're extinct. They were wiped out centuries ago. They adapted. They hid. And they waited. They developed a poison designed specifically to kill Draconids. It's in my blood now. In my children's blood. We're dying. Bile floated closer, her scanner beeping rapidly. The readings made her feel sick. The poison was like nothing she had ever seen. It changed and adapted every few minutes, attacking the Draconid cells in different ways. By the time their immune system figured out how to fight it, the poison had already changed again. How long? Daehyun asked quietly. Hours, Shirak said. Maybe less for my young. Their armor hasn't fully developed yet. They're more vulnerable. Where is your homeworld? We can take you there. 3 weeks away at your fastest speed. We'll be dead long before then. I sent a distress call to my people, to the council, to anyone who might hear. No one came. They said the risk was too great. They said the political situation was too complicated. They let us die out here alone in the dark. Shirak's voice was filled with pain, but not anger, just a deep, terrible sadness. You should go, little humans. There's nothing you can do. Your technology is too primitive. Your medical knowledge too limited. Even my own people couldn't save us, and they've had millions of years to advance. What hope do you have? Bile finished her scans and floated back to the ship. Inside, she pulled off her helmet and looked at Daehyun with tears in her eyes. She's right. The poison is too advanced. It's adaptive, constantly changing. I've never seen anything like it. Our medicine isn't designed for Draconid biology. We don't have the equipment, the knowledge, or the time. It's impossible. The bridge was quiet. Outside the windows, Shirak held her children close, waiting to die. The crew of the Pathfinder looked at each other. They all knew what the smart choice was. They should leave. Report what they found. Let the council handle it. That was the responsible thing to do. But Daehyun thought about his own mother back on Earth. He thought about what she would do if he was dying, and someone told her it was impossible to save him. She would fight anyway. She would try. Because that's what love does. He looked around at his crew. At Byul, the brilliant doctor. At Taewan, who could fix or build anything. At Hanara, who could solve problems no one else could see. At all of them. Impossible just means no one's figured it out yet, Daehyun said. Byul, I need you to try. I need all of you to try. We might fail. Probably will fail. But we have to try. Hanara smiled. Then let's get to work. The Pathfinder came alive with activity. The crew transformed their small exploration ship into a research laboratory. They had hours to do what the galaxy's greatest minds said couldn't be done. Outside, Shirak watched the humans work through the ship's windows. She didn't understand what they were doing. She didn't understand why they were trying, but for the first time since the attack, she felt something she thought was lost forever. Hope.